Your Excellency, Honorable Minister, it is always a pleasure to be back in Abidjan. It's one of my most favorite places to come to, and I don't say that to flatter you or the people of this beautiful country where I lived and have such beautiful memories. I'm particularly grateful because I know this week the government and the people of Cote d'Ivoire have opened up their beautiful city of Abidjan to Africa. This is just the first in what is going to be a truly eventful week in this beautiful country of Cote d'Ivoire. And I stand here in solidarity but proud association with the work that is going to be done in this conference. In UNEP, we have the privilege of being the hosts of the African Ministerial Conference on Environment, which we convene for the African Union. And this important conference gives voice to Africa in global negotiations on climate, principally because this conference is on climate. But Africa also speaks with one voice in many other global processes around the world, and it is guided by the African Ministerial Conference on Environment. So we speak with the same voice on desertification and drought, on biodiversity, and now on the all-important treaty we are negotiating on plastics. Why is this important for you here on the Conference on Climate Change and Development? Because some of Africa's, if not the best of Africa's leading thinkers, experts on climate change and development are sitting in this room, and the outcomes of the deliberations of this meeting are going to contribute in very practical and significant ways to the outcomes of the African Ministerial Conference on Environment. Later, on the 4th and 5th, in the culmination of our engagement in this country, when Africa's ministers show up, they are going to use the outcomes of your deliberations and really the guidance on how Africa should negotiate going forward to come up with a common position for Africa. So when we go to Baku, our ministers will speak with one voice and our heads of state and government. When we go to Cali for the Convention on Biodiversity, our ministers will speak with one voice. When we go to Saudi Arabia for the COP16 to combat drought and desertification, our ministers will speak with one voice. And when we go to Busan to negotiate for the Treaty on Plastics, our ministers will negotiate with one voice. And later on, next year, when our heads of state and government meet at the African Union Commission Summit, our ministers will be able to report on the outcomes of these global processes. So what the government of Ivory Coast is doing this 7 or 8 days, enabling Africa to really meet and negotiate, is very important. In UNEP, the work we do demonstrates the intersectionality of what we do. This year's AMSEN special session is highlighting the work on the Convention to Combat Desertification, on drought, land degradation, and desertification. There's a very clear intersectionality between the conversations we have on climate change and the conversations we have on drought and desertification, but also on ecosystems restoration. Your Excellency, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen who are here, climate change is a threat multiplier, and we live just on the belt above us of the Sahel, and we know the battle we have on our hands in Africa to combat desertification and to limit the devastating multiplier impacts of climate change in the Sahel. In UNEP, in June this year, we were able to secure $70 million to support the Sahelian countries to fight the advancing desert and to deal with the issues of desertification and drought. But we know that the battle we have on land degradation and desertification is not limited to the Sahel in Africa. To give you an example, we know that Southern Africa now is struggling under the worst drought they've ever seen, a severe food shortage that is threatening lives in that region. And then I think 2 or 3 days ago, I read that the Kariba Dam was drying up and those countries are going to have the worst power shortage they've experienced in history. Climate change is real. When we talk about the fact that we are living under 1.1 degrees now, it is real. In Kenya, where I am based and where UNEP has its headquarters, we are being told the beautiful mountain ranges of East Africa, including Mount Kenya, are going to lose their beautiful ecosystems, including the ice caps that present for a unique ecosystem that the world comes to see, and the beautiful savanna grasslands. So these are issues that touch us in very personal ways. We are losing lives, we are losing livelihoods, and we cannot power or industrialize Africa, as our partners in the African Development Bank would say, if we cannot generate power. And so as we sit here today with you, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of UNEP, I'd like to conclude by saying that we are very grateful to be part of this process, because we will be. We will use the outcomes of this important session to contribute to the decisions that will be made by the ministers. And while the conversations are around climate change, as I've said in UNEP, we know that there is a very clear intersectionality among all the global processes that the world is going to be discussing in the next few months. In UNEP, we refer to it as a triple planetary crisis of climate, nature, and pollution. But as we prepare for the General Assembly and the Summit of the Future, we have produced what we call the Foresight Report, and in fact, we know it is a polycrisis. The global crises that we are facing that are all linked to how we deal with climate, with nature, and pollution. Before I came here, we met with the African group of ambassadors in Nairobi to brief them on what we'll be doing here. And the dean of the Africa group, as we call them, made an important statement, and he said, you see, Africa's lands are dying. While we have the world's highest percentage of arable land, if we don't do something about climate change, about desertification and ecosystems restoration, we are going to lose our beautiful lands. And he also said, we must address plastics. And if Africa's soils are dying and we are polluting our lands with plastics, our waterways, our wetlands, and our beautiful lagoons, we are exacerbating the problem we have. And so, Your Excellency, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, I look forward to the deliberations and outcomes of this conference, and I also want to reiterate our deep, deep gratitude to the government of Cote d'Ivoire that has opened its doors to the peoples of Africa this week to come up with very important outcomes that will contribute to very important processes globally and for our continent. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.